There is a sound if you listen closely, a low murmur, soft as fog, brushing the cobblestones of a sleeping street. It's not the voice of a crowd or the echo of a stadium, but something quieter, a memory shared across continents, passed in whispers, from father to son, from mother to child, told over television static and weekend radio, retold beneath rusting goalposts and flickering bar lights. It is the kind of story that floats on a breeze, gathered in dusty corners of Argentina, coasting atop Neapolitan rooftops, and circling the earth like a prayer, not shouted, not demanded, but held gently with warmth and with wonder, the dreamlike tale of Diego Maradona tonight. We will not watch him score breathtaking goals. We will not study tactics or statistics. Instead, we will close our eyes, and enter the theater of night, where legends walk slowly across imagined fields, and the sound is soft, like the brushing of lace beneath a Buenos Aires moon. Lay back, breathe. Let your thoughts settle like dust after a match on a neighborhood pitch. Let the story arrive, not as an explosion, but like candlelight creeping across an empty room. Before Maradona was a name etched in stone, he was a boy just like thousands, one among many, cradled in the arms of a neighborhood where mud clings to shoes and mothers watch closely from half-open doors. In a small house, held together more by love than brick, he was born October 30th, 1960. The fifth child, the first boy, to Don Diego and Doña Tuta Villa. His beginning is not a place painted on tourist maps. It is rough, proud, full of noise and loyalty and longing. A place forgotten by presidents but remembered by neighbors. Here, boys chase dogs through puddles. They dribble rusty cansand, dream with eyes so witherthy swallow the sky. And on one such afternoon, a child was seen gently tapping a deflated ball with something more than precision, something otherworldly. Even then, time seemed to slow, as if the dust paused to watch. The boy's name floated between alleyways and tin roofs. Did you see him twist his foot like that? Like a dancer, like a ghost, like God had put music in his ankles. He didn't know what he would become. No child ever really does. But around him, stories began to grow, stories that never stayed still, stories shaped by afternoon matches on empty lots, by the whispers of overalled uncles and wide-eyed cousins, stories that reached beyond their walls, over the fences of hardship, to far-off places where dreams are traded like currency. There is a kind of storytelling reserved only for those who make people feel, not those who win, not strictly, but those who make hearts lean forward, eyes dampen without warning. In Diego's case, this began not on a grand field but among billowing laundry-lined sand, the scent of boiling beans. By age 8, he was a shadow weaving between older boys. By age 9, his feet wrote poetry in the blisters of dirt patches. There was no choreography, and yet every move he made felt remembered, as if passed down across generations from spirits who once danced in the dusk. A local coach, Francisco Carnejo, saw something he hadn't seen in years, perhaps ever. A boy who treated a football as something alive, not an object to be kicked, but a companion to be caressed, spoken to, trusted. A flick of the toe, a knowing glance, a love affair. Cornejo took him in. The boy joined Los Cebolitas, the Little Onions, the youth team of Argentina's juniors. He was a puzzle piece that changed the whole picture. They strung together, unbeaten, streaks like threads woven into a fable, and though his body was small, almost fragile, his spirit filled stadiums. Those first matches were held not beneath blazing lights, but under the trembling glimmer of evening cloud sand, the sighs of mothers in the stands, clutching rosaries, not for goals but for gentleness, for childhood to last just a little longer. People gathered not just to win, but to watch him move, how he made defenders vanish, how the ball stuck to his feet like a promise, and when he turned 15, still not tall enough to reach most shelves, still drowsy from afternoon naps, he debuted in the Argentine First Division, a child among men. October 20th, 1976. Only 10 days before his 16th birthday, Argentinos Juniors played Torres de Cordoba, and with half the country distracted by grown-up preoccupations, a teenager stepped onto the field like entering a dream. At his first touch, he backheeled the ball between the legs of an unsuspecting defender. Perhaps it was instinct, perhaps it was play, but to those watching, something else was happening, a feeling rising behind ribs, a breath taken and not quite released. A whisper began, something fragile shared between hearts tuned to beauty, the kind of whisper that starts before a miracle, balanced between belief and awe. Maradona. The name, soft and round in the mouth, the name, still not yet lightning, but already rumbling in distant clouds. The morning sun over Villa Fiorito was never in a hurry. It came slowly, hesitant, nudging past the iron sheets and cracked walls as if unsure where to land, in this place where clotheslines outnumber windows, where laughter and hunger turns echoing through the alleys. A boy with black curls and curious eyes chased a dream, even when he didn't have the words for it. There was dust, not the storybook kind, golden and warm, but real dust, clinging to skin, settling on bread left too long in the open, washing hung like flags of resilience, and the kitchen, if you could call it that, smelled of stew, salt, and care-laced prayers. Duna Tota stirred the pots, her shoulders rolled forward with the weight of 5 children, and a poverty so consistent it became a member of the family. Yet there was laughter here, and where there was laughter, there was space for a boy and his ball. Not a new ball, not the kind tied with bows or bearing logos, but one stitched and restitudental. It felt more comforting than any pillow. A ball that, when lifted by Diego's foot, seemed to forget it had ever been broken. His father, Don Diego, worked construction, silent, broad-shouldered, skin toughened by sun and cement. He did not speak of dreams. He built things, walls, roads, shelves that rarely leaned. But on Sundays, when the world slowed, he would set down his tools, sit with a cigarette pressed between 2 fingers, and watch his son, not the way some fathers watch, with critique or rivalry, but with something closer to awe, like a man staring at a fire, hypnotized by its gentleness and unpredictability. Diego spun in circles, chasing his shadow. He kicked bottle caps, danced between imaginary defenders, and whispered narrations to his own moves. Maradona lo pasa, gol. He played barefoot until the soles of his feet grew wiser than most shoes. He learned balance first by walking fences, and then by never falling when the world tilted around him. When he was just 7, his uncle Cirilo gave him a gift, not a toy or a trinket, but something far more powerful, a worn leather ball, somehow still firm. It was heavier than the empty promises of adults, but lighter in spirit than anything he'd ever held. That ball seldom left his side. He slept with it against his chest. as if it had a pulse that lulled him into dreams. And when one afternoon caught the eye of Francisco Conejo, a youth coach with a steady gaze and a mind tuned to genius, the world began to shift. Conejo saw more than a street child with fast feet. He saw theater. He saw questions being answered at thought coaches hadn't even dared to ask. The boy was invited to a practice session with Los Cebolitas, a youth squad so tightly knit they shared more than kits and drills. They shared bread, scraped knees, and dreams too big for their shoes. Maradona, still shy and withdrawn, stepped onto the patchy training ground, clutching the ball to his ribs like it was breathing. The field, dry and uneven, did not give him generosity. But then, he did not need it. He danced, not with showboating, but with an old rhythm, feet speaking in tongues, touching the ball like one touches sacred things. Even the older boys slowed. Even Cornejo forgot to yell instructions. And when the session ended, Francisco whispered to another coach, "I think we've found a treasure." Every great myth begins not with trumpets, but with heartbeats slowing, with eyes locked on something the rest of the world hasn't noticed yet. In the years that followed, Los Cebolitas became something more than a youth team. They became a storm, muted by humility, breaking records with the gentle certainty of waves rising and falling on familiar shores. Unbeaten for over 100 matches, they spun circles round opponents, often with Maradona at the center, conducting without conducting. As if his pulse set the tempo, his laughter gave permission to dream. He began entertaining crowds at half-to-measuring first division matches. A curly-haired wonder juggling ball sand, balancing them on his head, knees, shoulder, as if he were conversing in a language elder than spoken word. Spectators stopped chewing their corapon, vendors missed sales. Grown men whispered to their sons, "Remember this name, Diego, remember." And yet, for all the marvel in his home, he remained the boy who washed dishes, who ran errands, who curled under blankets stitched with holes, while his parents whispered of school bags and broken faucets. Fame hadn't yet let itself through there. Dusty doorway. Then came October 1976. He was called up to debut for Argentinos Juniors. Barely 15. Still with the innocence of soft cheek sand, a voice not yet deepened by age or exhaustion. The locker room smelled of liniment and tension. Older players joked in clipped tones. He sat quietly, or wrestling with resolve, as a coach nudged him toward history. Day against Tollers de Cordoba. He stepped onto a professional pitch for the first time. And if the grass felt different, if the crowd buzzed louder than usual, he did not let it alter his rhythm. Before the press could adjust their lenses, before defenders could assess the child among men, Diego received his first pass and, with a flick of his heel, sent the ball through a defender's legs, as nonchalantly as shutting a window against the summer heat. The crowd did not roar, not yet. Instead, a hush. That same hush, ... when candles are first lit in chapels. When someone opens a letter they never expected to receive. The rest of the match, blurred. He didn't score. Argentinos Juniors didn't win. But something had moved. Something bigger than a scoreboard. People left their seats not quite able to describe what they had seen, but they knew, and they would tell others, in murmurs and raised eyebrows, that the boy had done something not taught, not practiced, but summoned. Back in Villa Fiorito, his neighbors would gather around radios, nodding with knowing smiles as news of El Pibe de Oro began to spread. and Diego would return home, kiss his mother's cheek, fall asleep to the lullaby of distant traffic and the hum of insects. The ball tucked beside his bed, the world had cracked open a sliver dot, just enough to let a dream slip in from the dirt lot, tiptoeing softly, destined for stadiums echoing with memory. The first time Diego stepped onto the grass at La Bombonera, it was not just cleats meeting earth, it was thunder finding sky. The stadium itself seemed to inhale, 40,000 dreams lifting at once, yellow, blue, and trembling. The fortress of Boca Juniors had found its chosen one. The transfer had not been simple. Clubs across Europe offered mountains of promise. There were riches, trophies, bright light futures. But for Diego, it was always Boca. Even as a child, when asked what he wanted most, he didn't speak of mansions or medals. Just a quiet smile and 5 words, jugar en la Bombonera. To play at the iconic slanted stadium, where chants echo like sea winds and where the people don't watch football, they breathe it. Where every pass is an opera note, and a misstep feels like heartbreak under floodlights. In 1981, the dream came true. He arrived in blue and gold, and the city of Buenos Aires leaned forward as if watching its own storybook rewritten in real time. From the first match, he danced, not in arrogance, but like gratitude in motion. The ball kissed his left foot, like it recognized its home, and even defenders stepped back, momentarily lost in appreciation ball, remembering they wore other colors. There were goals, some whipped from impossible angles, others dribbled in gently, like lullabies, and the crowds responded not just with cheers, but with something rarer. Hush, a silence born of awe. When magic happens right in front of your eyes and even noise forgets itself. But even this chapter moved quickly. Fame is not a gentle friend. It brings lights too, bright for sleeping shadows that linger past dawn. In 1982, Argentina traveled to Spain for the World Cup, and with them, the weight of anticipation, the defending champions, and now, with Maradona, a shining prophecy at center stage. He wore the 10 shirt like it was stitched from prophecy, not cotton. Shoulders, still soft from youth, but eyes carrying the burden of a nation. The tournament unfolded not in crescendos, but collisions. Spain baked beneath the sun, and so did Maradona. Pressed by defenders, kicked by opponents, targeted head-on without mercy or subtlety against Brazil. His frustration surfaced, tempers flared, a reckless kick, a red card, and the boy, who had risen like sunrises, sent off in shadow. The exit wasn't spoken of loudly, just a collective sigh across Argentina, a knowing that greatness still slumbered, waiting for time to refine it. And as the cheers faded in Spain, a deal shimmered in the Mediterranean. The colors shifted from blue and gold to red and blue. FC Barcelona, a crown jewel of Europe. The footsteps of Cruyff still echoing through Catalan corridors. In June 1982, Diego arrived, 2 bright cameras, open palms, and checkbooks heavy with promise. He was welcomed not as a prospect, but as a savior. But saviors are still human, and camp, new for all its glory, was a cold place for warmth. There were triumphant moments. Goals slalommed past elite defenders, defying geometry and tradition. Crowds gasped. Statues were imagined, but even as the highlights stacked, so did bruises. Opponents didn't aim to beat him, they aimed to hurt. Heavy tackles came like thunderstorms. One, in particular, A tackle from Goicoechea of Athletic Bilbao shattered his ankle, and with it, a season. While his bones healed, trust fractured. The locker room grew cold, politics surfaced. He was foreign, flamboyant. His stardust unsettled those built from stone, and above him, boardrooms played chess with his future. Barcelona expected obedience. Diego, however, had no interest in being tamed. By the 1984 Copa del Rey final, the storm had swelled to breaking point. Facing Athletic Bilbao, tensions boiled like summer sidewalks. Maradona was heckled, his dignity bruised, and when the final whistle blew, it wasn't the score remembered, but the violence. He snapped a flurry of punches. Kicks sparked like matches, bodies scattered across the grass like fallen pieces of a dream undone. For Barcelona, it was over. A farewell signed not in gratitude, but in injury reports and moral outrage. Diego walked away not with regret, but with something taking root, resolve that somewhere a city could exist where his fire would not be feared, but worshipped back in Argentina. His name was not diminished. Among the humble homes of Villa Fiorito, on radio dials in dusty kitchens, he remained the boy woe, flicked bottle cap sand, dribbled dreams down alleyways, and somewhere further south, far from the powerhouses of Europe a bit, closer to chaos and color, a city watched him with longing. A city of volcanoes in its chest and poetry in its veins. A place waiting not for a player, but for a son, Naples. It arrived not as a decision, but as a gravity, a pull from south of Rome, from a city misunderstood by headline sand, feared by many who had never walked its streets. Naples, it wasn't Paris with its grandeur, or Milan with its fashion, or even the polished myth of Turin. It was a city whose beauty was bruised, but whose soul burned brighter because of it. In the summer of 1984, Diego Maradona stepped onto Neapolitan soil, and the city exhaled as if after centuries of holding breath. They say 75,000 came to San Paulo Stadium to greet him, to see a man, but more than that, to feel hope reawaken, to see the ashes lift. He walked out in Napoli blue beneath a fierce sun, and the crowds roared, not rise like a cheer but like a hymn. No player of such magnitude had ever gone there. To them, to the working men woe, ate lunch wrapped in yesterday's newspaper and worshipped not saints, but sent a dash forwards. Maradona became theirs not in metaphor, but entirely. They painted murals, they named babies, they threw confetti of their mortgage papers, welcoming the boy from Villa Fiorito as if he had never left. And Diego saw himself in them, in the grit and chaos, in the Sicilian gesture sand, the late-night melancholy tear. At last was a place as wild and wonderful as he was. Napoli were not giants, they were not Juventus, not the glossy pride of northern industry. They were hope held loosely between bruised fingers. And Maradona, with his left foot like a brushstroke, began to paint a masterpiece on cracked canvas. He moved like no one else in Serie A, among leagues of systems and formations. He was a song, improvised, aching, joyful. The city changed when he touched. The Boar Street vendors stopped mid-sail. Fishermen left their nets. Priests started mass early or later depending on kickoff. Every match he played looked less like sport and more like communion, and slowly, Napoli climbed one season, then another. Whispers turned to chants, chants to certainty. Ingredient by ingredient, a miracle was being prepared. Then came the 1986-87 season. the season when sky and sea seemed to agree. Naples had waited long enough, with Diego as captain. Napoli battled Titans.Juventus. Milan, Inter.N1. On a May afternoon in 1987, the city erupted, not in celebration, but in rapture. Their first ever Scudetto. The scrawled N of Napoli stood above all others, and above that, his name. Children danced in alleyways. Old women sobbed on porches. Church bells rang where no one had pulled their ropes. Graffiti appeared overnight. Maradona is God. It wasn't a slogan, not really. It was how they coped with what they felt, the sheer impossibility of it. He had taken a forgotten city and made it immortal in one hand. He held a match ball in the other, their hearts. That season, he scored wonder goals, some curling with wicked grace, others banged in with venom, but always with that left foot that seemed not part of this earth. He'd begin a run surrounded by defenders and end it alone, with goalkeepers slumped and fans roaring with more disbelief than joy beyond the pitch. He walked the streets as king and child both. He gave money to the proteas. If he remembered they once were his family, he danced at weddings, hugged strangers, sat laughing in kitchens whose roofs liquored when it rained. But even gods grow tired, and Diego was not a god. He was a man who carried infinite weight in a frame meant only for one life. Napoli, too, placed upon him bath, crown, and chain. They loved him fiercely, but needed him desperately. And yet still he performed European nights. Under starlit skies, the ball glowed silver against the dark, and Maradona moved as if he wrote the script while the anthems played. One by one, they claimed more trophies. A Coppa Italia, a UEFA Cup in 1989. Napoli defeating teams from cities with marbles, statue sand, stock markets. But this was different. This was volcanic joy from a dockside city that spoke in Valsand. Loved like fire, Maradona had made them feel what they had been long denied. Respect, dignity, victory. He became a religion, a face on lighters. Keychains, painted tiles hung in kitchens. To be Neapolitan meant to rise with Diego's goals and fall with his pain. And though clouds loomed, the whispers of nights spent too long, rumors of late phone calls with dangerous friends, still, they protected him, loved him without condition, because he had given them the unthinkable glory, not borrowed, but their own. And in return, they gave him what perhaps mattered most, a home that loved him, not despite his flaws, but because of them. The summer of 1986 felt like a mirage suspended in sunlight. Mexico, hot, high and humming with ghosts, waited with open arms for the world's most sacred tournament. And among the teams that arrived wearing colors of gold, crimson and sky, one man stepped into its heat like a prophecy looking for its page. Diego came not just as a player, but as a question, a storm wrapped in grace, a boy who had climbed from dirt lots in Villa Fiorito, the gates of Olympus not upon chariots, but on tired feet and a left foot kissed by myth. The tournament began as all beginnings should softly. He danced through South Korea. He stitched passes through Italy, and when he played Bulgaria, he scored a goal that curled like smoke pulling toward the heavens in each game. He wasn't just present, he was elemental, wind, water, fire, pulling strings that only he could sense. And then came June 2, a day scorched, not only by sun but by memory. Argentina versus England. Quaterfinals. But for many, it was something deeper, something beyond football. In 1982, soldiers had died in a place few had heard of, Las Malvinas, the Falkland Islands, young men from muddy barrios and English coasts alike, never returned now 4 years later. No gunshots, just a stadium in Mexico City, Azteca, an altar in concrete and noise. There had been no wars declared in the tunnel between those teams, but the tension wore boots. Each player carried more than just the emblem on his chest. The first half unraveled in tight rhythms, England strong, cautious, Argentina feverish, poetic. Then, the 51st minute. A bouncing ball, pressure mounting. Diego leaped, small in frame, large in intention. The ball beat England's keeper by inches. ... Punched in, not by forehead, but by hand. He landed, arms wide, eyes darting like a guilty boy's. The linesman hesitated. The referee pointed goal. Iceland protested. They waved arms, shouted into fate. But in the record books, no ink hesitated. Later, Diego would call it a little with the head of Maradona and a little with the hand of God. And the world would laugh, or scowl, or marvel, depending on where they were standing when they heard the tale. But the story was not over. 4 minutes passed, and then lightning. He received the ball deep in his own half, shadowed by men in white. The pitch a chessboard of intention, and then her began. One twist, one burst. He danced past one, then another. Midfielders lunged. Too late, the ball clung to him like a thread to a needle. His legs didn't move, they flowed, ankles folding the ball into rhythm, acceleration that seemed to break the rules of muscle and friction. The commentary gasped, the crowd's voices staggered, eclipsed by the gravity of the moment. He passed a fourth player, then a fifth, a final feint. The keeper dove. Too early, too hopeful. Maradona slipped to the side, let the ball roll forward, and with one more gentle touch, sent it into history. Goal. Perhaps not a goal, exactly, but a myth given breath. It would be called the goal of the century. Poets had tried to describe it. Artists painted it with oils and ore. Children mimicked. Eat across cracked streets until their legs failed. Even now, to watch it feels like remembering a dream you never actually had, but wish you did. Argentina won that day. 2-1. A broken relationship with its past reconciled through 22 boots and one man possessed by some ingently divine. The tournament continued in the semi-finals. Belgium felt yet another Maradona brace. He didn't run. He floated. He didn't play. He narrated something older than games. Then came the final, June 9. EST ADO Azteca. Again, Argentina versus West Germany, a contest of iron and art, steel formation sergeants, improvisational brilliance. The match turned and twisted. Argentina led to -0. Germany clawed back to 2-2. The balance wavered like a flame in hesitant wind. Then Maradona, not by goal, but by vision, split the German defense with a pass so precise it felt whispery dinto. The grass. Jorge Barichaga received it, ran like his breath was being chased, and placed it beyond the keeper's reach. 3-2. Final whistle. A golden confetti, rainfall upon men with stained socks and weary lungs. Maradona lifted the trophy, not like a symbol, but like a memory fulfilled. He had not just won a tournament, he had reshaped time. He had closed a wound back home. The streets pulsed with drums and tears. Paint peeled from Walser's murals were drawn overnight in Naples. 2. They wept. He was theirs, even in light blue and white dot. And Maradona, he knelt on the field as cameras, blinker-danned flags unfurled, his back to the world and his eyes toward the grass. Perhaps he was thanking it, perhaps he was resting, or perhaps he was remembering a smaller field in Villa Fiorito, where dreams had no shape. Until this, the Scudetto had been won, the parades had passed, the murals were painted again, and again until even the peeling walls of Naples seemed to wear his face like a hymn. But celebration, like starlight, does not erase shadow, and though the streets still chanted his name, the nights began to change, not suddenly, but with the quiet persistence of sinking sand. Diego, the boy who danced through dust, the man who curled goals into heaven, was become a Ninga figure, divided. By 1989, Napoli had won again, another Serie A title, another chapter in what many an ever-rising legend. And yet, behind closed doors, the wear showed. His body, once fluid with joy, now stiffened after matches. The smile, such a familiar part of his myth, flashed less often and only in controlled bursts for cameras. Cocaine had become less a seat for Tand, more a silence. Sharadby, those closest to him, city officials, club presidents, even reporters they knew, but nobody asked, because what he brought too precious, and what he battled too inconvenient. The Camorra Naples underground heartbeat loomed quietly at first, then more visibly. They admired him, protected him, gave him what he needed, and asked nothing, until the debts were no longer made of money. He'd appear at Partisno, one dared photograph, stand beside Menno paper wood, name out loud, and laugh, but never fully. It was a different world now. The weight of being a savior began to collapse inwards. And then came 1990, the World Cup held. Ironically, in Italy by then. The line between his two worlds, Argentina and Naples, had blurred into something strange and tender. Neapolitans waved two flags, one light blue and white, and one just deep sky. The North looked on with suspicion, whispers of betrayal floating like dust. When the semi-final pitted Argentina against Italy, it was held in Naples San Paolo Stadium, Diego's cathedral. Outside, a civil storm brewed. How could a Sicilian grandmother cheer against the Ozzari? How could a dockworker net root for their adopted son? Diego leaned into this uncertainty. Before the match, he said softly into microphones, "I don't like that now everyone asks Naples to be patriotic. For 364 days a year, they call you thieves and Southerners. Now they expect your loyalty." It wasn't rage, it was knowing that night. The stadium split. Some cheered for Italy, others for Maradona. The match unfolded in tight, nervous motions, goals exchanged, breaths held. It reached penalties. Diego stepped forward, kissed the ball and scored. Argentina progressed. Italy wept. Naples questioned everything. And just like that, his sanctuary trembled. In the final against West Germany, Diego wore weariness, like an extra layer beneath his kit. They kicked him, clawed at his ankles, tripped him slyly where the ref could not see. He created what he could, but Argentina lost. 1-0. A penalty was awarded. He protested with all that remained in him. It did not matter at the podium. He stood while the German anthem played, tears pushing past pride like water through old stone. Afterwards, they returned to Italy, but it was different now. The press, especially in the north, turned cold. Stories emerged of shadowy friends, of parties stretching into dawn, of his missed trainings and find-defying absences. Then came March of 1991, a drug test positive cocaine. The news struck fast, like a thunderclap that had gathered for years. Suddenly choosing a day, 15 months. That was the ban. The club had no choice. His Napoli, cut the thread. He didn't protest. Not loudly. He'd known the line long before he crossed it. He was arrested briefly, afterward a raid, a quiet hallway. Diego alone under flashing bulbs. Cameras caught him, exiting sightless with sunglasses and shame. He fled to a clinic, then to Argentina, then nowhere at all. His body softened, his eyes lost their mischievous fire. The world did not turn away, but leaned in closer rigor to watch a star fragment. This wasn't tragedy in cinema. This was no errors. If a family photo had begun to fade while still in your pocket in Villa Fiorito, neighbors turned down their radios when the reports came in. Naples, the murals remained, but were left to peel. The boy with the dancing feet was now a man with ghosts trailing just behind every step, and still through it all the name remained in lips, on shirts, in memory. Maradona, even in exile, he was never absent. He returned not with roar, but with rust. After the ban, the exile, the quiet cracking of illusions, Diego re-entered football like someone emerging from a long tunnel. Light blinking against retinas, once accustomed only to shade. He signed with Sevilla in 1992. Spain again, but not Barcelona's grandeur. Sevilla, sun-baked, stubborn, romantic in its own way. The welcome was curious. Enough fans still believed. Others whispered his form wasn't what it had been. The sharpness was dulled, the weight more visible. But still, at times, there was a shimmer. A pass curled perfectly. A dribble that hummed with echoes. And in those moments, it became clear the genius hadn't left. It had only grown tiresome of being so closely watched. He stayed a single season. 1 year of unfoldings, missed trainings, flashes of brilliance, silent departures and apologies, faint as sighs. Then, quietly, gone. In 1993, he joined Newell's Old Boys, a gesture half poetic, half practical, back in Argentina, though not for Boca yet. He played 5 games, 5 enough to startle the misty-eyed romantics, enough for the rest to say he should have stopped. But for Diego, stopping wasn't simple. Stopping felt like surrender, and besides, there were still glimpses. A turn so sudden, it felt like cheating gravity. A shot so deceptive, the keeper dove before the strike even came. Then, in 1995, he came full circle. Boca Juniors. Home. Not the club of his teenage fire. Not exactly, but a memory rekindled. He wore the shirt again, and though the legs refused many asides, the crowd never did. They cheered each touch. They sang long before kickoff and long after losses, and Diego, tired as he was, let the love soak into his bones. He stayed for 2 more seasons, walked slower, thought faster. There was a goal against Belgrano, a left-footed strike from distance, not quite powerful, but inevitable. He turned to the crowd after, arms outspread as if to say, "See, not gone, not yet." During this twilight, his body waged war. His weight fluctuated, his breathing labored. But when he smiled, truly smiled, it was still the smile that lit alleyways in Fiorito, In 1997, near his 37th birthday, he stepped away for the final time. The silence that followed was both immediate and incomplete. He retired, yes, but Diego didn't vanish. He appeared on TV shows, loud, brash, opinionated. A man of impulses, still allergic to censorship. He spoke of love and betrayal, of God and justice, of football and politics with the same ferocity. His body bore the battles of living publicly. Surgeries followed. A heart attack in 2004 nearly took him. The world held its breath. Argentina prayed with clenched fists. An undrunk mate, he survived. New tattoos appeared. His daughters became a sanctuary. The birth of a son he first denied, then embraced. He reconciled, fell, rose again. A cycle not unlike the tides. Then coaching called Anne. Unexpected voice in 2008 appointed him manager of the Argentine national team. Critics circled. Skeptics smiled. But there he was, prowling the sideline in black jackets and trembling shoulders, clapping with the same hands that once moved worlds. He chose raw emotion over tactics. He hugged his players like family. Press conferences became theater. The 2010 World Cup in South Africa, a strange opera. Argentina started brightly. Messi was brilliant but goalless. Diego prowled the touchline like a man promising the stars to the boy he once was. Then came Germany. Quarterfinal. A heavy loss for O. Not angry, just heartbreakingly ordinary. The dream collapsed gently. He was dismissed shortly after. But Diego never truly fit the mold of manager. He wasn't designed for clipboards or systems. He was born for chaos and combustion. In later years, he coached clubs in Mexico and Argentina, Dorados, Gymnasia. Each appointment came with candles of hope, and each flickered in and out without explosion. His health worsened. Knee surgeries, more heart issues, scars forming inside and out. His movements slowed, but his voice never. He cursed injustice, praised underdogs, defended the vulnerable, railed against institutions. He wore loyalty like a second skin. He often spoke of Fidel Castro and hugged Venezuelan flags. But he also told his daughters he loved Disney movies and couldn't sleep without the television on. And though the world loved to speak of his contradictions, Diego never denied them. He simply laughed and said, "I am who I am, and I don't ask to be understood." Perhaps redemption is too neat a word for him, but reflection that yes, in late interviews he often teared up, not over matches or glory, but over his mother, his decisions, the way addiction had stolen hours that might have been hugs. He apologized. Though not loud enough for some, it came quietly in letters, in interviews, in gestures. He hugged players he'd once insulted, applauded rivals, thanked fans who waited outside gates, even in rain. And through it all, Argentina tried to figure out what to do with one of its greatest sons, broken, glorious, raw, human. They built statues, yes, sang chants, held exhibitions, but more purely, they remembered him, not just for the goals, but for the ways he made them feel something unnameable, unforgettable, fully alive, even as his body diminished. The idea of Diego remained stitched into generations. A man who once lifted the world's greatest trophy but still longed, above all, to be seen as a boy who loved the ball. It began with silence, not the kind found in reverence or prayer, but a sudden hush, a radio gone still, a television screen dimmed not by power loss, but something deeper, a shared, fragile pause. November 25th, 2020. The day the world learned that the boy who once juggled miracles in Aliwas was gone. He had not been young for some time. Not by calendars or pulse, but in the minds of millions, he had never really aged. Somehow, in all the weight his body had carried, under all the noise and the headlines, Diego remaineth, barefoot child, chest out, eyes forward, chasing a ball through dust motes and echoes. News poured slowly at first, then flooded airwaves. Argentina held its breath firmly in its chest, as if afraid to let grief pour from the lungs. The government declared 3 days of mourning. Stations switched to piano scores, and in Naples, they lit candles not in churches, but in alleyways, bized murals, each one now more a Srinathan, a painting. They sang his name in balconies, in stairwells, in narrow streets, strung with washing line sand. Decades of devotion. They did not cry goodbye, but gracias. Thank you for the goals. Thank you for that run in 1986. Thank you for making us feel like something impossible. For a moment, hours, his body, small as always, was brought to the Casa Rosada, the pink presidential palace, and thousands marched. Not in silence, but in song. People slept on sidewalks to touch his passing casket for seconds. They threw shirts, letters, rosaries, and pieces of their hearting to the path. As tribute, some wept like he was family, because he was, not by blood, but by memory. They remembered huddling around radios in childhood kitchens. They remembered cheering in bars filled with strangers turned brothers. They remembered where they were when the hand tricked the godsend, when the foot spoke in poetry. And though one might argue a man is not his myth, in Diego's case, it's difficult to separate the two. He lived fully, perhaps too much so, but he pulled life in both hands and drank from it with cracked lips and unrelenting thirst. He had failed, yes, many times, in ways that hurt not just him, but those around him. Yet there has rarely been a man who could show both failure and brilliance in equal measure and still be wholly loved for both, because his mistakes were never hidden behind glass. They were out in the open. Raw and trembling, he apologized in public and stumbled in private. He did not float through this world, untouched. He tripped and took us with him, but still he rose again and again, not polished, not rehearsed, but defiant, always carrying inside him the same spark from Villa Fiorito, somewhere in the hours after the world learned. A little boy in a neighborhood much like Dagestede, his shoelaces tighter. He juggled a ball alone, barefoot, as if repeating a prayer didn't yet understand. And others joined. They didn't say much. They didn't need to in his absence. They conjured him not as a ghost, but as ritual. Because Diego didn't belong in me to the decades he lived in. He became inherited, told like a bedtime story. A hero whispered through chain-link fences and father-son car ridicin the way to Sunday matches. And in this way, he is with us still, in the mural that has not yet faded, in the chanted off-key, in the grainy footage of him juggling oranges with the smile of someone who understood all he needed was a ball to be free. When asked if he deserved forgiveness, he said, "I made mistakes, yes, but I gained love, a lot of love. And that love, that warm, aching, imperfect, unfiltered love, is why he will never vanish. Even when the historians grow tired, even when the tapes are worn, someone, somewhere, will whisper, once, There was a boy. He didn't walk. He glided. He didn't play the game. He made the game dream. And maybe tonight, on some quiet field tucked somewhere behind the stars, he's lacing up his boots. The ball waits. The sky holds its breath. And Diego, with laughter just behind his lips, is about to begin again.